Story 1. My first memory of the internet is probably playing those pixelated dress-up games on a random website when I was about 7 years old. I would spend hours choosing outfits for my little virtual doll. Story 2. I was a child when the internet first became a reality in the early 1990s, and I will always remember that Netscape Navigator interface. Story 3. I was sitting in my office on a Friday and heard one of the other women say she was going to browse the internet over the weekend. I literally thought she meant going surfing. When I finally had the ability to check out the internet, someone suggested I visit a certain website. I realized at that moment we were all in big trouble. Now, people who may have never met others with the same disturbing ideas could connect, and that scared me. Story 4. My dad was an early adopter in 1988 when I was 3 years old. He used a green screen DOS computer. It took him 4 days to download and piece together what we called the ABC game. It consisted of 4 or 5 little games with cute songs and graphics. He sat me on his lap and explained, "This is from the internet. It's going to change everything." Story 5. I got an Apple Newton which came with a free email address. I was excited until I realized no one I knew had an email address. It took a couple of years before my company or anyone in our industry got email. Story 6. Dial-up. You can enter a website, then your computer dials up. After about 10 minutes, have a snack, take a shower, and check back. Still dialing up. I figured this colossal time waste would never take off. Story 7. Being taught how to conduct a search online in school when I was about 8. There were also Ask Jeeves and Yahoo. Story 8. Dial-up AOL and trying to download photos at 2,400 baud. Click a photo, grab a beer, get 1/4 done, and maybe, just maybe, it will be complete. Story 9. My uncle, who was on Prodigy, sent my dad, who was on America Online, a 7-second clip of the Beatles' birthday song for my birthday. I was around 10 or 11 years old, and it took about 30 minutes to download the attachment. Story 10. When bulletin board systems and FidoNet first allowed you to have a real, unique email address on the internet that worked on all boards, you could dial up and send and receive messages with anyone who also had a unique email address. It was as if the world opened up to me. Story 11. Playing The Sims, Purple Place, Stardoll, Habbo Hotel, AOL Instant Messenger Chat, WeWorld, Yoville, and Webkins. I miss being a kid on the internet. Story 12. I miss GeoCities. It made me think that the internet was going to be an awesome and interesting place. Story 13. MSN chat rooms. That's where I learned ASL, which I promptly told my friends meant age, sex, location. Story 14. A girl I corresponded with who worked at the University of Colorado mentioned it, and I had never heard of it. Only colleges and the military had it at the time. I eventually got on Prodigy, then CompuServe, and finally an internet service provider. Those were exciting times. Story 15. Installing a WinSock program to get Netscape working. Browsing the raw Usenet feeds, decoding posts, reassembling them, and then extracting all the files while hoping nothing was corrupted. Using FTP to download files from public sites. Good times. Story 16. Before we had America Online, we had Prodigy. I remember almost nothing about it except going into an internet relay chat room. My mom was actually the one who was very interested in internet relay chat. She was an early adopter. I was shocked and excited about being able to chat with people all over the country. That was in 1991. Story 17. MUDs in college are multi-user dungeons, essentially the first online games. I was talking to someone playing a Daiku MUD, and he mentioned that he was out of food. I had no idea what he meant. He said, "Oh, sorry, I'm Australian." I realized that I was sitting at a computer talking in real time to someone on the other side of the planet. It blew my mind. Story 18. I was working at a center for toxicology research in the late 1970s. They had the capability to receive scientific articles from other laboratories and government agencies electronically. It amazed me. Story 19. I was much too young, and that's where I learned about harmful individuals. They were prevalent in those chat rooms. Story 20. Radio morning DJ. Okay, so you type HTTP, then a colon, and then a backslash. Which one is the backslash? Story 21. Signing up for an email at USA.net at a library because a friend in Ohio asked me to do it. I think it was 1996. Story 22. How to guides for beating old point-and-click adventure games on DOS. Story 23. You can now chat online. Story 24. Being at my friend's house, having a great time and goofing off in the chat rooms. I think it may have been AOL. It was such a long time ago, around 1998. Story 25. A 1200 baud connection to the university was used to telnet into multi-user dungeon games. Then, I obtained a phone number for a local bulletin board system that had a file to download, which was the current composite list of bulletin board system phone numbers. Story 26. I went to my uncle's place. He had just gotten a PC and internet for the first time. We decided to explore a chat room, probably Yahoo, or maybe even one that predates it. It was mind-blowing talking to people overseas. Story 27. When I was a kid, my cousins and I searched for inappropriate content on Google. Fortunately, we didn't find anything, though I don't remember why. Story 28. Picking up the 30-day free trial disc and my local tower records. I couldn't wait to get home and log in for free. Story 29. I was 12 in 1999 when I got online for the first time at my friend's house. We searched for aliens on the internet browser. Story 30. A Minecraft video about pranks or traps comes to mind. I no longer remember the channel or much about the video, except that there was no commentary. It was just a showcase of the trap followed by a clip of someone falling for it. The person falling, I'm pretty sure, made nonsensical noises. Given how long ago this was, it could have been another language, especially since they had an accent. However, I believe it was just nonsensical sounds made for comedic effect. I've always wanted to find that video again for some reason, but there's absolutely no information to go on. All I recall is the nonsensical noise reactions and that one of the traps involved Diamond, Oregon. I do remember that this video led me to Corralis's ship battle, which then led to Corralis's build tutorials, and eventually to Stampy's sinking feeling episode where I discovered my favorite YouTuber. In short, my first memory is of a Minecraft video that I will probably never find again. Story 31. It's the sound of a dial-up modem. The one. PIKRRRRSHCHCH. Beep beep beep. SHHSH. The connection is established. It was almost magic. And a little hassle. If someone picked up the phone, everything was interrupted, and you shouted, "Mom, don't call." Story 32. Elementary school library, mid-1990s, on a Macintosh Performa. Staying inside during recess, opening a web browser, looking for Star Wars pictures using a search engine, and printing out a few to take home. Story 33. I asked my dad when I was a kid if I could log into the internet like he did. I don't remember it, but he probably let me browse some eBay pages on dial-up. After that, I spent a significant amount of time playing RuneScape. Story 34. In 1999, I was searching for naked boobs with my older brother. I was 8 years old, and after the picture loaded slowly from top to bottom, I wondered why these women had milk on their faces and chests. My brother didn't know or care either, because they were just breasts. Story 35. Waiting a solid minute or two for the next Joe cartoon interaction to load. Frog in a blender was one I remember most. Story 36. Creating my first username. My elementary school had one computer that you could sign up to play SimPark during lunch. Story 37. My first YouTube memory is the "Don't Forget the Blueberries" video I saw as a child. Two kids are trying to make a fruit salad. The younger one jumps excitedly, saying, "Don't forget the blueberries." She then trips and falls, knocking over the bowl. Story 38. A guy came up to me out of nowhere and asked if I had seen the new site Persian Kitty. Yes, I am older than the internet. So I went home and typed it in. Story 39. The classic startup sound. Logging into battle.net to play StarCraft and learning to type as my 12-year-old brain had to adjust to the speed at which insults were hurled at you in that game. Story 40. A client-server system featured a monochrome display with all characters in green on a black background. Users had to click send frequently, which made it quite tedious. This was around 1981. Story 41. Walking through a department store in Australia, I glanced at a screen displaying text enticing people to download numerous Metallica songs and see Bill Gates nude. I did not linger. Story 42. The beautiful sound of dial-up internet connecting was so awesome until my grandma or mom picked up the phone. Story 43. A 2400 baud dial-up modem connected to a bulletin board system, playing Mutants, Trade Wars, Legend of the Red Dragon, and others. Story 44. My high school computer teacher showed us a Star Wars website. He made sure to cover the keyboard when entering his password. The first time I was online outside of school was at a friend's house. We visited a site about bands we liked, and I kept thinking, why are we looking at bands? Can't you see pictures here? Story 45. Going to regret this, the My Web Search Toolbar virus. I couldn't resist all those free custom cursors. Story 46. In 1991 at university, I used communication programs from Newcastle University in Australia through the United States. It was all command line back in the day. Story 47. I am going to embrace my inner nerd. RuneScape from the early 2000s is a game my mom wouldn't allow me to play for more than 20 minutes a day. Story 48. Bulletin board systems, Telnet chat rooms, Usenet newsgroups, Archie, Gopher, Wace. Then one day a browser appeared. Story 49. Playing games on the PBS website and the Disney Channel site when I was in elementary school. We had a family computer in the living room that my parents and I shared. Story 50. Dial-up with its signature squeal and fuzzy sound. The internet was very new, and I frankly couldn't see a practical use for it, so I canceled. Story 51. Going to the website for my favorite television show, The Tribe. It aired on Channel 5 in the early 2000s. Story 52. Dial-up internet was so slow that you had to keep images turned off for web pages to load in a reasonable amount of time. I entered a Disney-themed chat room and was amazed when someone actually talked to me. I was part of Usenet fandom groups. I used a dictionary to translate an article from Icelandic because online translation tools hadn't been developed yet. Although this was in 2008, it highlights the challenges we faced before advanced technology became available. Felt like walking uphill to school both ways. Story 53. I created my first email address using one of those AOL CDs. It's still active, but I have long since forgotten the password, which has locked me out of another email address because I foolishly used that one from the 1990s as the recovery address. Story 54. I was at a computer shop reading a story on a website. I saved the web page on my flash drive so I can read it at home. Story 55. My dad was talking to someone in another country in the early 1980s. We received a phone call but were disconnected. Story 56. Gopher, Internet Relay Chat, Usenet. All text-based. I connected to a system called Merit using Trumpet WinSock in Windows 3.1. This would have been in 1994. I'm old. Story 57. Hearing about the possibility of the information superhighway, colleges began experimenting with transferring bits of messages. When it first emerged, it was dial-up, long distance for me initially, so it was very limited with a really slow modem at 2400 baud. I was running WinSock dial-up in DOS, and there were some bulletin board systems available, but not much more than that. I used a program called Microlink as a terminal program, which was better than DOS. Then Windows 3.1 and Netscape arrived. Story 58. I was trying to download content from LimeWire, and it ended up being the Tuckshar Massacre instead. 13-year-old me did not need to see that. Story 59. Text-based internet that we used to connect through the public library system. I think I connected through Claris Works. We had numerous early Star Wars fan discussions and memorabilia trading. I also remember the old CompuServe sites and searching them for Nintendo 64 news while downloading images slowly. Story 60. Browsing the internet around 1996 or 1997 from an internet cafe, without a computer at home, I explored websites about Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. I also checked my Hotmail account during the same session. Story 61. Some guy came to our house to install it. The internet didn't make any sense to me at first. He had given me some websites with games, but they seemed harder to find than regular disc games. Then I found Yahoo, and it started to make sense. Story 62. A lady was being fisted on a boat. He was punching slowly with alternating fists. It was 1993, I was 12, and we had just gotten our first computer. Took a long time for AOL to load the clip. Story 63. Not truly the internet, but I used a local dial-up bulletin board system to discuss the Star Wars movies with another kid for hours. Also not truly the internet, but my dad subscribed to a service that sent us a CD every month. The CD was an interactive catalog of items that could be purchased. When an item was bought, the computer would dial in to the service provider and place the order. My dad bought a Bob Dylan CD using this service, and it arrived in the mail about 2 weeks later. We were absolutely amazed. Truly the internet. I'd get home from school, dial up, go to Yahoo, navigate to magazines, and then drill down through the menu to find Playboy. If I was lucky, I could look at 2 or 3 pictures before my parents got home, an hour and a half after me. Story 64. My coworker showed me Mosaic, the first web browser. There was no internet access, so he had to load HTML pages from the disk. I thought it was pretty cool, believing that tech enthusiasts would appreciate it, and thought that would be the end of it. Now, my mother, in her 80s, uses a web browser every day. Story 65. My older cousin took me to Kent Library on the campus of Southeast Missouri State University. I logged in, and the first thing I typed was Nintendo.com. Story 66. In 1993, the public library had dial-up internet access before the World Wide Web days. I had to apply for access and get approved. Finally, I dialed in, it was all character-based, and I browsed using applications like Archie. Honestly, there wasn't much to see. I went back to bulletin board systems and America Online. In 1994, a kid in town had a T1 line installed in his house, set up a bank of modems, and began selling access. I jumped on that deal right away. Back then, only computer enthusiasts cared much about the internet, and I never had an issue dialing in. I initially browsed using a browser called Cello, which was quite basic. Mosaic was pretty good, but I preferred a browser called Frontier because it actually had tabs. The World Wide Web was much better than Archie. Story 67. Back when I got my first iPad 2 and set it up with a SIM card, I wanted to test it for the first time with a browser and the internet. So, I searched for horse, because nothing else came to mind. Story 68. Finding the website with the lyrics to "We Didn't Start the Fire," along with explanations for every reference. 1994. Story 69. Packing the computer in pillows so my parents couldn't hear it dialing up at night when I was supposed to be asleep. Story 70. The Coca-Cola website took about 5 minutes to load the polar bears on the screen. I believe it was around 27,000 bits per second over the landline. Story 71. For my Puerto Rican friends who grew up in the 1990s, do you remember the chat rooms that I believe Daddy Yankee's site had in the late 1990s and early 2000s? That was my very first experience being online, thanks to my sister-in-law, who took me with her to her college campus to hang out until my school started. Story 72. My dad received an email from my uncle with an attached video of the commercial for canned salmon, where the fisherman fights a bear and then kicks it. Took almost an hour to download, and we watched it about 20 times, laughing harder than we ever had before. Story 73. My first experience was probably in the library in the 90s, but on my own time, I was using internet communication and query to connect with local people. Story 74. I had to dial long distance to establish a serial line internet protocol connection. Gopher, Usenet, and ARPANET were the norm. There were no web pages. I had to disconnect for my wife to make a phone call. Story 75. I don't really know. I was born in 1993 and I probably went online as early as 3 or 4 years old with my dad. The earliest memory I have is downloading torrents on Kazaa, Aries, and LimeWire between 2000 and 2001. I downloaded Dragon Ball Z music and various videos. Those were fun times. Story 76. I remember when people transitioned from Lynx as their web browser to Mosaic because Mosaic could display images. Lynx could only handle text and links. People used to be able to subscribe to a daily email update that informed them about new web pages that came online since the previous day. Story 77. Having to cite one source from the internet in a college paper, I went down to the library to find my source. However, it was so slow that I just made one up. Story 78. I used to own a Kindle and found a way to access YouTube. For some reason, I would only get DanTDM videos. I was pretty lucky, now that I think of it. Could you imagine if I got some strange channel? Story 79. I remember the first time I went online. My best friend's uncle had it for work and let him use it sometimes. We were excited to try it out. I recall him asking me what we should do, and we decided to look up pictures of Spider-Man. I went home and told my parents we needed to get it. Story 80. My tech-savvy uncle and cousin came to our house in the early 1990s and connected the computer to the phone line. They brought some 5.5-inch floppy disks and installed a program called Prodigy. I heard the dial-up sound for the first time. Then he sent a message to his computer, and it responded. We could now make a local call to dial-up and have instant messaging to them in Connecticut without paying long-distance fees. We're talking green screen monitors and DOS, possibly MS-DOS pre-Windows. Story 81. Paying $3 per hour for access, and then an additional $3 to play Air Warrior 2 online. I got yelled at. Story 82. This is going to sound like one of those back-in-my-day things, and that's because it is. Because I'm old. Before home internet was available, I had a friend who used to go to a cafe where you rented computer time. I went with her one time, and she showed me a chat program she was using to talk with someone in Europe. I was totally blown away. Once home internet became available, it was restricted to 10 hours per month for around $30. I would use up those 10 hours in a couple of days, then had to wait a month before it reset. To top it off, we were using a fast 14.4 modem. It would take about 45 seconds to load one picture on the screen. The discovery of a limitless variety of free entertainment when the internet was new was incredible. I spent countless hours trying to think of something cool to look up. That's also when I realized that the internet is exactly like diving into a full septic tank. Some of the content I encountered was unlike anything I ever imagined I would see. Good times, good times. Story 83. I started using eBay in its early days and created an account. I wanted to buy my first laptop, so I asked my mom to purchase it online. I thought $18 was a great deal, but all I ended up buying was a liquidation book of some sort. I messaged the seller and he laughed at me. Story 84. In high school, someone connected to the internet from one of our classroom PCs, and I was amazed. The year was 1992. Story 85. My dad got America Online on our Windows 3.1 machine, and I distinctly remember one of the first things he did on it was play a game that ran simultaneously with a football match on television. Between plays, you could guess if the offense was going to pass, run, or kick, and you may have also been able to guess if they would score or get a first down. You would earn points for guessing correctly, and there was a leaderboard. It was a group of people in real time trying to predict what the teams would do. Honestly, it was a pretty cool idea, and I wonder why that kind of thing didn't really take off. Story 86. Putting an AOL disk we received in the mail into the family computer with my friend. We were probably 11 or 12 at the time. We discovered chat rooms and talked a lot to strangers, which we thought was hilarious. Story 87. Downloading and printing dinosaur pictures from my dad's office computer. It was the early 2000s. We didn't have internet at home. Story 88. I discovered the Nickelodeon website around 1999 when I was 6 years old. I heard about it on television and think I played a SpongeBob game on it. Story 89. When YouTube was first popular, I would go to my friend's house, and we would spend hours showing each other funny videos or music videos that we had discovered on our own. Story 90. This neurodivergent woman in my community college computer lab was watching explicit content and behaving inappropriately. The IT staff were unsure how to handle the situation. I just wanted to focus on typing my paper, but she was being disruptive. Story 91. My first negative memory was buying Half-Life 2 at the age of 13. I struggled to install Steam, which was frustrating, especially with dial-up internet, only to find out that my computer couldn't run the game. I haven't had the nerve to play it since then. Story 92. Internet Explorer and not understanding what Google did. I knew about Google Earth and what it did. Story 93. My dad showed me Google Earth when it was first released, and my mom showed me music videos on YouTube when it was launched as well. That was back when we had just one family computer. Story 94. Looking for Yu-Gi-Oh cards on sites that would have definitely drained my aunt's credit card. In hindsight, I should have tried. Story 95. The first website I ever visited was a gaming website with a guide for beating Resident Evil 2 because I was stuck when it first came out. That is my first internet memory. Story 96. My friend and I spent an hour on his dad's computer, which was enough time to visit about 4 sites and download around 7 images. It was truly amazing. Story 97. I downloaded a demo of Castle Wolfenstein overnight because it was 1.3 megabytes, and my dad said, "You're not tying up the phone line all day." It was worth it. Nazis are terrible. Story 98. There was an online game similar to chess, but the powerful pieces were pay to win and had different abilities. I was very young and have no idea what the game was called. After some research, I found it was Tactics Arena Online. Story 99. At my childhood friend's house, my friend asked me how to spell naked. I responded not knowing why he asked. He then called me over, and I saw naked people typed into the browser of his mom's work computer. That was quite the introduction to that category. Then his mom walked into the room and immediately saw what was on the screen. I was dropped off at home right afterward. Story 100. Dialing up my first bulletin board system in the early 1990s on a Mac Plus felt like taking my first step into a new world. Story 101. I was at a telescope facility in West Texas. A guy there told me to get the weather report. I was used to calling on the phone. He instructed me to go to the computer terminal and type a strange command that started with www. The computer printed out the weather report from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Story 102. IBM Aptiva. 1995. I was trying to learn addresses and started web coding for work and home. I was also learning dial-up baud rates, which came with horrible charges from phone companies. I set up daisy chains in my office and printed in daisy format because it was a disaster in the beginning. I learned about building computers, installing hardware, and discovered what proprietary really meant. Story 103. Cartoon Network. Circa 2007. I was 4 years old. My sister taught me how to use Internet Explorer. Story 104. Went on a field trip to a nearby university back in 2001. They showed us computers connected to the internet, which was rare in our area at that time. I still remember visiting the website of a local news station, as it was the only one I could think of at the moment. That was probably the first thing I ever searched online. Story 105. Usenet and multi-user dungeons. It amazed me that I could connect to a server across the country for free when 10 cents a minute was a great deal for long-distance phone calls. I never would have imagined. All I had was an account on a Unix server that I could access via modem and work on a terminal from there. I could achieve T1 speeds to the internet from the server, but anything I wanted on my personal computer arrived at 2,400 bits per second. No graphics were available except for ASCII art. Story 106. Signing up for eBay in 1997 and discovering a worldwide marketplace that I could never access through newspaper classifieds, which at the time was the only way to buy and sell from home. Story 107. Logging into an ARPANET gateway from the SERC/Janet network in the UK, using X.25 to connect to University College London, and then using Telnet to access a host in the USA. This occurred around 1981 or 1982. The link to the US was SatNet, an experimental 2 megabit connection shared by UCL Computer Science and the Ministry of Defense. I was in York at the time. I was working on Open Systems Interconnection Protocols by 1984 at UCL, using them to perform file transfer protocol with other developers in the US. The delay was so significant that sometimes connecting to a host would time out before it could look up your IP address to log the incoming connection. During this time, we enabled domain name system, Before that, domain names were at best notional and reflected Unix to Unix copy maps more than anything else. You retrieved hosts.txt nightly from Stanford Research Institute Network Information Center to get an updated list of what places were online and reachable. In those days, you received an entry in the SRI NIC WHOIS if you wanted it. Someone printed a bound copy. There was essentially a telephone directory for everyone on the ARPANET who wanted to be listed. From memory, it included fewer than 10,000 people. Story 108. Dykamud. I believe the server name was Judy at Indiana State, but it's been a while. I had to stay in the terminal room because no one had connected machines in the dorms. Story 109. In the late 1980s, I accessed a terminal-based account through Delphi using a 300 baud modem. There were no web browsers, but Telnet and FTP allowed downloading documents and images, although the images took a long time to load. My first color monitor was a 12-inch enhanced graphics adapter monitor with a maximum resolution of 640 by 350 pixels at 16 colors, if the software supported it. A couple of years later, Mosaic and Netscape Navigator emerged, and everything changed. Story 110. Flash player games, chat rooms, Yahoo Answers, and dial-up connections making you wait forever for a single page to load. Story 111. I was about 6 years old when I saw my parents using a computer to watch YouTube. I don't remember what I watched, but it might have been family vloggers. Story 112. Walking in a line with all the other elementary school students in my class down to the computer lab. Everyone sat down in front of a Macintosh computer while we waited for the dial-up modem to connect. Once it finally did, we were all directed to open the web browser and go to the Yahooligans website. Story 113. Going into a cyber cafe and using AltaVista, my friend and I typed Pamela Anderson Gallery, followed by Pamela Anderson Pictures. Story 114. When I was told that my tablet had it, I just searched for the first thing I could think of that I was curious about. What does a plain engine look like? Story 115. Exchanging cheat codes for GoldenEye 007 in chat rooms helps you beat the game. It turns out there are several push-button codes you can activate at the beginning of the level, and they still count if you complete the level with them active. Story 116. In the early 1990s, my friend had a computer with Prodigy. She booted it up, and I was not that impressed. Story 117. I was at a friend's house. We were having fun and exploring different websites. The last site he visited before his parents returned was an adult site. Story 118. I was a kid during the peak of the Beanie Baby era. The first website I saw was theirs. I remember asking my dad for help, and he opened the page before leaving for work. Story 119. Playing Counter-Strike 1.6 on my family PC or people getting worried when they accidentally opened the internet app on their phones. Story 120. When I was 15 and I first attempted to gain access to the internet, I had to call around to find a service provider who could provide access. In Australia at that time, the internet was still provided through a network called ARNet for universities and the government. This was around 1993, and the only public internet provider in Australia offered an email and newsgroup feed that was updated 3 times a week. I wanted to be properly online. After several inquiries, I eventually found a computer club at one of the universities in my city that might allow me to use their connection. I had to catch 2 buses to get there and quite literally beg them to let me use it, as it was not intended for anyone other than university staff and students, and they were lucky to even have the connection they had. Luckily for me, they agreed. It wasn't dial-up, and it was entirely text-based. I had to travel to the university every weekend afternoon, every Saturday and most Sundays, to use the connection shared through a collection of terminals connected to an old VAX mini computer they had. They also had one of, if not the first internet-connected vending machines ever. I didn't see anything like it again until the Sydney Olympics or shortly after. Downloading anything from the internet involved browsing through binary newsgroups for what caught your interest and hoping that all the parts were available to decode your files. Then, I used a connected PC to copy the file to a floppy disk from their mini computer. I can't remember the exact process. It was long and convoluted. Not something most would bother with, let alone know how to do. Yes, I was determined to gain access, and I achieved it a good 2 to 3 years before public access to the internet in Australia became common. It was not in any way, shape, or form comparable to the internet of today, but you'd better believe it was a notable distinction between me and my computing class in high school that I had the access I did. Story 121. Call incoming to home phone. Me, a kid playing an online game, screamed to my mom, "Don't pick up the phone. Please." She picks up the phone. You lose connection to the internet and you lose the game. Story 122. I messaged a girl from halfway across the United States. We exchanged addresses and sent each other letters. We both got in trouble for that. Story 123. In primary school during the mid-1990s, we all gathered around as someone pulled up a webpage about frogs. Everyone went, "Ooh." Story 124. I remember we got a computer around 1998 and hooked it up to America Online. My dad loves the band Kiss, so we went to the Kiss website, which was inappropriate. I remember my mom covering my eyes while my dad freaked out and yelled, "That thing is a sex machine." Story 125. Some of my earliest memories of the internet are that it was extremely disorganized and difficult to navigate unless you had specific addresses. The dial-up modem was very annoying and made the World Wide Web almost unusable. I remember getting cable internet in 2006. That is when I finally started to explore and was able to download music. Google helped with browsing around that time as well. Story 126. MIRC is a platform for chatting with people in a friendly environment. JoseQ's EmuViews is a game emulation site where I would download MAME ROMs. Story 127. The earliest thing I can remember is probably printing out walkthroughs or cheat codes for PlayStation 1 games. Any earlier than that might be downloading interactive desktops. Story 128. There is a website on something, possibly a cereal box or a book from school, so my dad pulled it up for me. I just thought, man, that looks so boring. Story 129. GeoCities, Angelfire, AltaVista, Ask Jeeves, Dogpile, Webcrawler, and Metacrawler. There were quite a few. Story 130. My dad printed out a list of smileys, now known as emojis, and stuck it next to the monitor. It included slightly smiling face happy, grinning face with smiling eyes laughing, slightly frowning face sad. It was so new to me that I didn't see it at first. I only realized after he suggested I tilt my head to the left so that the colon represented the eyes. Such peaceful times. Story 131. I remember playing the game A Bug's Life on Apple computers at school. MSN Messenger was popular and we often played Bomberman. It was a better time. Story 132. While exploring a Fort Belvoir Army Research Unix system, I found a script that downloaded virus information from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was linked to a scheduled task that made it run once a day. Once I understood its purpose, I executed the commands manually and began exploring the internet, all 25 servers. Gopher had just been released, I believe. The World Wide Web was not even close to existing. I missed those times. Story 133. 1995 was a long time ago. The 9600 modem and Archie requests defined that era. Usenet was wonderful, and I still have an online friend I've never met from that time. Story 134. Watching Jacksepticeye play a game where he was a rabbit that jumped around. He entered an arena and fought a few other rabbits. Story 135. I remember playing Penguin Diner on Y8 Games. I got in trouble with my mom for not sharing it with my siblings. I closed the tabs so they couldn't play since I didn't tell them the name of the game and they couldn't spell it correctly. Story 136. I asked my friends in the schoolyard if they are online later that day to play some Slide-A-Llama. Story 137. I was at my grand-aunt's house. I went into her office and saw stacks of paper everywhere. It was extremely unorganized. I sat at her desk and turned on her computer to play dress-up games. I would give anything to remember the name of my favorite game website. Story 138. I was 9 years old, going to a university near my house, standing in line to get a permit to use one of the few computers at the library that had internet access. Most students there had no idea that something like that was available. Having an email account on a site that was defunct before the first version of the World Wide Web took off, I also remember internet communication and chat query. I remember the first internet cafes in the city and then some years of dial-up at home. Story 139. I racked my brain for a while and it came down to three things. RuneScape because another girl who liked me told me that a girl I liked played this game and she did too. Yahoo to make the account, and MapQuest to figure out how to navigate for my parents. I had to create a second RuneScape account because I forgot the password to the first one. Boys will be boys, I guess. Story 140. That strange noise the modem makes when the internet connects. Connecting a dongle to the computer for internet connections. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.